Shabbat Shalom. Today we're going to read the texts that have to do with the building of the golden calf. This image that Israel was asking for because Moses stayed away too long. And while you read about these things and you see this in the text in the Bible, never stay only at this face value text, but read and use it as a mirror for yourself to ask yourself the question, could it be that I have a golden calf in my life because of my lack of patience, because of my lack of faith, and because I want to keep things under control, and my Moses is staying away, my promise that I'm waiting for staying away is taking too long, so I will do my own thinking, my own filling up the void that could not be fulfilled in the way and the time schedule that I want. Let's read from the text today. In the text in the Bible, Exodus chapter 31, verse 1 through 5, and the texts will be on the screen. I will read, and you'll see that the text that I read is only a part of the larger context from which it's taken. First text. The Lord spoke to Moses, and he said, "Behold, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and in all kinds of workmanship, to devise skillful works, to work in gold and silver and brass, and in cutting of stones for setting and in carving of wood, to work in all kinds of workmanship." In other words, what you read here is the endowment of gifts, talents to a young man, and what people see on earth is this artful artist, this skillful artist that does his work, and he received his talents from the Lord. And I believe that with painting and with music and other arts and science, information, heavenly information, is received by the recipients, and they then do the things God wants them to do. This is for today, the first text. And when we read the text, we need to realize that it's so short after the departure and the exodus, the leaving, the running away from Egypt. And there's a young man that has so much wisdom, insight, knowledge, that he is able to build and do all these things that have to do with the Mishkan, the temple in the wilderness. For this kind of construction, you don't only need skills in terms of building making a building, you also need spiritual insight. Spiritual insight to understand, to realize, to appreciate how a heavenly matter, a heavenly object needs to be built on earth. The translation of heaven to earth. Namely, it shouldn't be only something beautiful, but also something heavenly. It should show how we look like, because the temple is like us. That we are the temple of the Spirit of God, the Bible teaches us. Plus, it needs to be a convincing thing to show how God looks and works in the way that this earthly object can do this. And what are we talking about? We're talking about a tent, which covers and gives shelter and gives shadow. I've been in a Bedouin tent with my wife, and we know from experience how safe and shielded from the hot sun and the stark, sharp light it was. Then this tent has 3 divisions, like the third heaven, the third of the heavens that the Bible in the New Testament speaks about. There is a voice inside this tabernacle, which is the parallel to the voice of God who speaks from heaven. not only in this tent, but to us, and in other times, also in the New Testament, a voice from heaven who speaks, which is in Hebrew the bat kol. Then there is this lid of the Ark of the Covenant, this lid of reconciliation, because relationship is possible. The Lord is there and He takes care and He wants to reconcile and restore relationships. Then there is the light of the menorah, the candle menorah, the holder, candle holder, the light representing the light in the heavens, as the light of the world. Then there's also the bread, the daily supply from heaven, the product of people outside paradise, with the order to have grain and to work in the sweat of your brow in order to produce this. There is the bowl of washing of the feet and the hands, because this picture needs to be there, that heaven is pure and clean. There is the altar with the frankincense, to represent, to give us a picture of matter that is smaller and finer than the earthly heavy materials that we know. Only spiritual matter is able to, from earth, is able to reach heaven, like our prayers. And the smoke, the holy smoke coming from this altar, this golden altar, is reaching heaven to show how this is done. There are the priests, the servants. Heaven needs priests. There's the high priest, a leader of these servants in the heavens. Messiah, conducting the service in the heavenly temple. And there are the sacrifices in the tent, around it at least, in connection with, on the compound of this tabernacle. Picture of what it is costing the Eternal One to make possible all these things and to sustain us. This artist, Bezalel, what is his name? Bezalel, I don't know how you pronounce him, but in Hebrew it's Bezalel, meaning in, Tzal, the shadow, El, God, in the shadow of God, is one of the examples that the existence and the deliverance and of Israel's leaders, the liberation of Israel, the births of special leaders, is based on miracles like this Bezalel, who received all these talents and gifts. Imagine how short an amount of time it was after leaving Egypt that this artist was able to make all these things. Where did he practice? Where did he learn this in such a short time? While in Egypt there was no opportunity that was given to study and to practice, or to express creativity. There are more miracles, those big cosmic miracles that are presented in the Bible, like the continuous of the existence of Israel, the sacrifice and the resurrection from the dead of Yeshua, the Messiah, the coming of Messiah, who will be king and will bring peace. Everything is focused on being in the shadow of the Eternal One. The whole Bible is calling us to come there and to take shelter. The mitzvot are only part of this, the commandments. Bezalel, in the shadow of the Eternal One. What does a person have to do? What can we do to come into God's shadow? And the answer is, learn to discover your need to take shelter. If you say, I don't need shelter, I'm fine, I'm happy, I'm safe, I'm protected, it's okay. You might be too protected and it might be too easy, because you might forget that you need God's shelter in times when it's not so safe and so peaceful. And some of us will realize when you live in places in the world where it's not safe at all, how important it is to be in God's shelter. He will provide eternal shelter for us. Let it start on earth. Let's read the second text in Torah from the book of Numbers, chapter 19, and then the first four verses. The whole piece is longer. The whole text is till verse 22. It's a special text added because of the fact that today is Shabbat Parah. It's a special Shabbat. It's called after the red cow that is used to make a fluid, which is to cleanse people after they have been in contact with or close proximity of a dead person, a deceased person. And realize that we all have been there, and this water, this special cleansing water, doesn't exist anymore. So no one is able to shake off their impurity. But let's read it. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, and he said, "This is the statute of the law which the Lord has commanded." He says, "Speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer without spot, in which is no blemish, and which was never yoked. You must give her to Eleazar the priest, and he shall bring her forth outside of the camp, and one shall kill her before his face. And Eleazar the priest shall take of her blood with his finger and sprinkle her blood toward the front of the tent of the meeting 7 times. So our attention is drawn on this Shabbat toward the purity which we need to have to get into touch, into contact with God in heaven. And disturbance is able to diminish our contact with God. A mobile phone might be the impurity that you cannot wash away with this water that was specially instructed in connection with being in touch with or in proximity of a deceased person. But there are other disturbances which diminish our contact. And one of the big factors in this world, in this time, is the mobile phone, which might be, if you don't, if you just let it go and you don't pay attention to this, it might be your golden calf that you have in order to be entertained when you need it, and that can fill up your void when you feel that, and stuff like that. If you don't realize that you are causing the disturbance yourself, the contact with the Lord will continue to be diminished, or could even be worse. And we don't even realize that we do this in our own way of filling up a void that needs to be filled up in another way. I'll come back to this. Even if you use all kinds of pious words and nice prayers and stuff like that, if you allow the disturbance to be there, contact is diminished. And if you don't cause the disturbance, the contact can be there. Even if you don't use pious words and prayers that are prescribed, but just your own original expressions to God. So this water, this purifying water, isn't here at this moment. That means, consequence, everyone is impure. There are people who say, doesn't matter, I'm still not giving a hand as a woman when I'm in my monthly period, or I'm sitting on a pillow, or I stay away, or a man can do this too. And we can talk about impurities and stuff like that in the Bible. The fact that this purifying water is not there has as its consequence that whatever you do, you're impure. You can ask Messiah to cleanse you, but you cannot claim that that you don't need the water and still can be clean if you go to a mikveh, a ritual bath, to cleanse yourself. Being in touch with or in the proximity of a deceased person means that you are ritually unclean. God is the God of the living, and the touching or the proximity of a deceased person is taking away this knowledge, this conscience about this truth that God is the God of the living, and your focus is toward the deceased person, and an impurity takes place in your thinking. Interesting that this red female cow used for this purification shows how important it is to be pure for God. Let's continue the text. We go to the text in Ezekiel for today also, Ezekiel 36 verse 23, starting at 16 through 36, but we only read 23 through 26. There we go. It's on the screen as well. He made the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards for the south, 24 for southward. He made 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets for, I think I have the wrong text. Let me see if I can find something more in the, here it is. I will translate from the Dutch. I will sanctify my name, my great name, which is desanctified among the peoples, the nations in the world, and you did it too. I will sanctify it again, says God. The nations will know that I am the Lord. Such is the word of the eternal God. When I show myself to you in front of the people of this world, to you as the Holy One, I will take you away from the nations and bring you together from all the countries. I will bring you to your own land. I will sprinkle pure water all over you, and you will be clean and cleansed again. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your gods. I will give you a new heart, a new spirit in your innermost being. The heart of stone I will take away from you, from your body, and I will give you a heart made of flesh. Helpful. So even the best actions we undertake are nothing in terms of purity because we have the wrong kind of heart. This heart isn't there yet. This needs to be delivered, and this time will come, but it's still, look around you. Even in the best of congregations, there is impurity, and don't think that the people that you think are doing the wrong things are worse than you are yourself. We all have our mistakes. We all have our incompetences. So God is Himself the one who is going to save us and give us this new heart and His Spirit. And I think that this new heart is also to do with the Torah, the Bible, written unto our hearts. It's a text in the Bible that says that in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6, for instance. But don't be proud of being this. Oh, the Torah is written in my heart. So nice. You cannot claim that the Torah is written in your heart because that shows your actions and your thoughts and everything show that when that is the case. But see Torah as a special way of therapy that God gives you in order to become whole. When a physiotherapist gives you instructions how to do your exercises because you have pain in your shoulder or wherever, are you going to proudly tell people that you have these instructions of the physician, or are you going to exercise and you hope to get rid of the pain, because that is how you can compare the Bible. The fact that we need a new heart means that we will always have trouble because of certain impurities, like impatience. In other words, it's normal to be an impatient person. I'm not saying it's good, I'm saying it's normal. This is the way we are, this is our natural being. Especially those among us who wants to have everything under control. The control freaks among us Who is a control freak? Look around in the room. Are there people who have their arms down? They are the ones that are really having their control over their limbs and know how to keep their arms neatly in the way they were. So the ones who are honest about their control freak capacities, they know how normal it is to be impatient. It's normal also to be not being able to trust. It's a thing that you need, a characteristic in your character that you need in order to be a survivor in this world. There are still cities, I've heard, where it's okay and safe to leave the door of your home open and unlocked, just closed but not locked, but not where we live. And that is one way of not trusting people, because there could be one bad person who wants to come into our home to do evil things. It's normal, it's a way of survival to not be trusting in any situation. But it's also difficult to have this mistrust, because we have the same trouble, blockage in terms of trusting the Lord. And so we need to divide between good and bad. Not easy. The fact that there is so much to do in the Bible about these two characteristics, trusting and impatience, or patience, shows that it's not normal to be so full of faith, so full of patience. It's not natural. It doesn't come by itself that a person is patient. It's not by itself that a person trusts. Another thing is that that has to do with all this, is that we are adamant in finding visible, measurable ways of expression, measurable and provable situations. It's important. We cannot just say things in a court session and we are believed at face value. We need to prove, and those who have their complaints need to prove their complaints. And if you have an honest court session, this will be the situation. This will be the way it's done. But not everything can be proven. We cannot just say anything. A personal experience, yes. A feeling, yes, is personal. You cannot prove it, but that's personal. But it's something else to hand somebody a piece of information and not saying or not able to say how you got this information. But if you are able to prove what you're saying and what you're giving, then the evidence is the means to convey a fact to other people convincingly. On the other hand, if you turn that around, it's not good, and the Bible is fighting against it, if you only have a means of giving, but there's nothing inside. The text in the New Testament, in Galatians, for instance, talks about this. Let's read Galatians chapter 6, verse 12 through 16. On the screen. As many as desire to look good in the flesh, they compel you to be circumcised. The book of Galatians is about a fight of Paul, not against circumcision of the male part of the population, but against circumcision with the wrong motive, for the wrong reason. Which wrong reason? Read the book of Acts chapter 15, verse 1. There it is explained what the problem was that was the inspiration to write the letter of the Galatians, to the Galatians. If you read Galatians chapter 5, verse 2, you can write it down or remember it. Read 5 verse 2. It looks like Paul is saying circumcision is wrong. If you do circumcision, you don't need Yeshua. You don't need Jesus. You don't need Yeshua. But then you forget why he why he writes this letter, and he's not writing against circumcision. He's writing against the people who have wrong motives to promote circumcision. What was the wrong motive? It's written in Acts chapter 15, verse 1. And what does it say? It says that if you want to be a part of the world to come, if you want to go to heaven, some people say, if you want to be a part of the world to come, you guys need to be circumcised, because this is the way you can earn your way to heaven. No way. The people in Acts chapter 1 are saying that's not the way it goes. And Paul is writing to the Galatians in his letter to the Galatians and saying, no way, you guys are not having the kind of good news. This is the kind of fake news. This is not the good news, because heaven is not earned by deeds. Are deeds important? Oh yes, they're very important. Can you earn heaven with it? No. You can just show with deeds in a convincing way that you're not only saying the things you believe, but that you're doing the things you say. So the New Testament is prohibiting outward things without content. And with circumcision it's even more difficult, because of this fact that there is a way of proving to God. I was talking about proving and having evidence in this world. We need it. I said it's true that we do need evidence, but circumcision is the wrong kind of evidence to prove that you are a child of God as man. It's not for women, it's for men. So you have fake news if you do that. And in Galatians chapter 5 verse 2, it says that you don't need Yeshua if you think that circumcision can bring you to the same place that the sacrifice of Messiah is bringing you to. You need to choose. What's the good thing to do? Circumcision, because Paul is not against circumcision. He's against circumcision for the wrong motive. And if you understand those two things, then it's okay. So the Galatians letter is doing away with this fake safety, fake security. Circumcision is, from of old, the sign of the covenant with Abraham, later with Moshe, with Moses, not more than that. Don't do it to give yourself a false identity and a false evidence that you have become more than you were before the circumcision. You're still the same impatient, not trusting control freak that you were before. This need of outward evidence that God is still existent, Israel had at the moment that Moshe took much longer staying away and coming back than they expected him to do. Too long for the people who knew impatience. Too long for those who wanted to keep things under their control. Too long for those who wanted to have a visible piece of evidence. Sometimes there is no piece of evidence. God is not visible. You cannot prove that he exists. It is a matter of faith. It's a matter of reading the Bible and saying, there's so much evidence, this must be true. And keep it that way in this world. Let's read in Exodus chapter 32, verse 1 through 4 about this. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron, and they said to him, "Come, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, they speak to him in a derogatory way. The man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him." Aaron said to them, "Okay, take off the golden rings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and of your daughters. Bring them to me." All the people took off the golden rings which they were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. He received what they handed him, fashioned it with an engraving tool, and made it a molten calf. And they said, "These are our gods." These are your gods, Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Oh boy. Not only against God, but also against Moses. So this is the situation. It was impatience, too much trust in their own speaking words, spoken explanation, their expectations, made that Israel made this molten calf, egel masecha in Hebrew, of gold. And they called it God. This is the God that brought us out of Egypt. And about Moses, they said he was the one who got us out of Egypt, and that they didn't talk about God. So they already didn't believe in God so much, those people who asked for this. And I'm asking at this moment, very personally, don't respond now that you would not do this, because each time that you say that you hear God's voice, or that you can that you know that something happened because he did it, be careful. You cannot prove that. If you say that it is so and it wasn't God, but it was something else, sometimes later on you find out, oops, this didn't go the way I expected it to go. Perhaps it wasn't God. Right, so be careful. Don't make your own golden calf and call it God. For instance, this was only an instance. What to do? What would we do? What do we need to do in order to have more patience, more trust, more faith in the God of Israel? What to do in order to make our own molten calf? What to do in case we are a control freak? Well, let me say this about this. These questions. Waiting for something important is difficult. The way we made an important exam, the way we're waiting for the report of a physician, we are waiting for an increase in salary, we're waiting for the boy or the girl with which we have a date, and we didn't hear from him or her. Difficult to wait, difficult when silence is knocking at our door. Things that are close by in our own experience, are in our own lives, I gave you some examples of that. The more control we have on the things we wait for, the more important these things are, and the more serious we are about it. But there is also situations where we have no control and wait for things like Moses, and his comeback was totally out of control of anybody. Moses was surprised these 40 days and totally impressed with what he experienced. And even more the people perhaps, or in their own way, the people who were down at the foot of the mountain waiting until he would return. And there was more. We read in the text that there was doubt with some of these people about the question whether he did it all right. Some wanted leadership, and wanted to exert leadership themselves, but were not acknowledged in their leadership, in their alleged leadership, that is. Some wanted to have the position he had. Some felt that Moshe didn't treat people well. They were not in agreement with his decisions. So, they had no patience. You always have more patience when you believe in the other person than when you don't, or have your doubts. This is why we sometimes give up too fast in relations, in school situations, study situations, in a congregation, because we know so much better how everything is supposed to be done. This is the reason why people go to Aaron. In their hearts they had their own gods already chosen, and the most important God we can talk about is ourselves. Read this text in Matthew 24, verse 44 through 51. Comes on the screen. Matthew 24. Therefore also be ready, for in an hour that you don't expect, the Son of Man will come. Who then is the faithful and wise servant? He's in the middle of a parable. Whom his Lord has set over his household to give them their food in due season. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord finds doing so when he comes. Most certainly I tell you that he will set him over all that he has. But if that evil servant should say in his heart, my Lord is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and eat and drink with the drunkards, the Lord of that servant will come on a day when he doesn't expect it, and at an hour when he doesn't know it, and he will cut him in pieces, one way of handling the situation, and appoint his portion with the hypocrites. There is where the weeping and the grinding of teeth will be. It looks like Yeshua is talking about waiting for Moses and is pointing at that. And that Yeshua is comparing with the expectation of the return of Messiah. Waiting for Messiah can be difficult, very difficult. If you are in difficult situations, if there is war or rumors of war around you, you are in an unsafe situation in your life, or people that you love are being killed, and or you're losing your hope. You're losing your job, you're losing a friend or a girlfriend, your wife, your husband, a child. Will you keep your faith in such situations? If you're not involved in these kind of things, will you keep your faith when you will be involved, perhaps? Will you wait for Messiah to come then? He will come. It's a cosmic situation that is promised in the Bible. Or do you lose your faith more than trusting in general your faith in God? Look in another text, 2 Peter 3, verse 3 and 4 and 9 through 13. Is another text that talks about the end of times. There's something you must definitely know. In the end of times, the latter days, mockers will come, walking after their own lusts, and say, where is the promise of his coming? For from the day that the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. And then verse 9 and following. The Lord is not slow in concerning his promise. This is Peter again talking. As some count slowness. But he is patient with us, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with great noise, and the elements will be dissolved with fervent heat, and the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, the earth or the land, that could be that he talks about the land in Hebrew, which they spoke, the word for earth is the same as the word for land. But anyway, it could be that it's indeed a cosmic event. Therefore, since all these things will be destroyed like this, what kind of people ought you to be in holy living and godliness, looking for and earnestly desiring the coming of the day of God, which will cause the burning of heavens to be dissolved, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. But according to his promise, we will look for new heavens and new earth, in which righteousness dwells. So this is all about waiting. This is all about patience. How can we practice? The text in the Torah what was it about? It was about making oil. It was about altars. It was about lights. Not about patience and stuff like that. But before you know it, you realize that everything is connected, because we can make all these beautiful things in this tent and in this holy tent that Moses had to make, or in the temple. But when push comes to shove, the truth of the matter is that we need to not have these beautiful things, but we need to practice our own faith in the connections that we have with people all around us. That's what it is. Our own trust in God, taking shelter, like this Betzalel, whose name means in the shadow of the Lord. So there is a big connection between making these beautiful things in the tent of the meetings in the desert, and patience and trusting and this kind of thing. So in the middle of summing up all the needed ingredients of this holy tent, all of a sudden in the middle of all the details, the Lord says, read on the screen, Exodus 31 verse 13. He reminds Israel and he says, say to the children of Israel, most certainly you will have to keep my Sabbaths, my Shabbat. For Shabbat is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, so that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. The interesting thing, when you read the first 6 episodes in the creation account, you read that the first day ends and goes into transitions into the second day, and it says this was one day. It doesn't say the first day. In Hebrew it says this was one day, an evening and a morning, and then it goes into the second day, and then the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. After the sixth, Shabbat comes. After the Shabbat stops, the text doesn't say, okay, this was it. Evening and morning, this was the seventh day. It doesn't say it. As if the seventh day never stops. As if the seventh day, the Shabbat, is a day that is to be compared with heaven. A day on which we can experience heaven, like at this moment that I'm speaking. And God is saying, you can read all these psychology books, and they are necessary, but there is one truth that you need to keep in mind, and that is, if you keep Shabbat, you're on track in building up patience, in building up trust, and in building up and breaking down, I should say, your control freak kind of nerdness. As if the Lord says, if you really want to learn to wait, to expect, learn to keep Shabbat. There's more in Shabbat than only lighting the lights. There are people that ask me, how do I celebrate Shabbat? Tell me about the candles, tell me about the bread, and tell me about this and that and the other thing. But the real nucleus, the real basis of Shabbat is to learn to be a good human being in terms of patience, trusting, and letting go of your control situation, desire, but be a practical person in this world. We need to be careful and lock our doors at night, and not even at night. Lord says, if you really want to learn to wait for me, also in terms of how you made the exam, how to have a nice position in your congregation, how your friend or your girlfriend is deciding on you, learn to keep Shabbat in the right way by learning to wait for God, because that will also feed into the moments where you have to wait, where there is a black hole in your soul that says, but I don't like waiting because I'm uncertain and stuff like that. See your own focus. See how you are holding on to your own important interests, your own agenda. Learn to let go of these things and give things in the hands of God, who decides and who makes the most important decisions. We're still there to serve, we're still there to do our things and do our tasks during the day and night. This is what God is saying to Moses in order to get Israel in the right form and shape. Focus on Shabbat, then you focus on the eternal one, on the Lord. If you focus on the eternal one, on the Lord, you have the right situation, the right measurement, the right position in order to make it in life. Sounds simple. If we continue to follow our own schemes, it's less simple, although it looks the other way around, less honorful. Shabbat is a sign between God and Israel and soulmates. It's like a wink, an eye sign between God and you to say, we're friends. We have this very precious connection. It's only getting better. And if you will experience a Shabbat, if you spend a Shabbat with the right kind of attitude, it is then that you will have given to the Lord this sign a holy wink with your eye. If you can't wait in certain important situations, it might be that you're going to do something through which you get earlier and faster what you think that you earn. Often that is not the right kind of thing to do and the right kind of thing to receive. Like the golden calf. Yes, it was understandable that people were impatient and were waiting at least, and that they begin to think, is it all right? The golden calf was the wrong answer. The Lord was angry. Moses is pleading for his people. It's a spiritual wrestling match. You can read this in Exodus chapter 32 verse 11 on the screen. 32:11. It says, Moshe begged the Lord. He said, Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people that you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? And he's reminding God of this liberating act. You have invested, don't throw it away, is what Moses seems to say. Why does Moses say this? Your people that you have led out of Egypt. It looks like he's reminding God. Did God need a reminder that he didn't do it for nothing? There is a Rabbi Huna who once said this about this question, about what Moses said because of the golden calf and the anger of God. The Rabbi said this can be compared with a wise man who opens a perfume business, a shop for his son, and he does this in a street where prostitutes are doing their work. According to the rabbi, it's not my story, business is okay in the street. Business is okay for the son of this father. And the guy is building also relationships with the women. Certain day his father enters the shop, is looking at his son with a prostitute. Father gets angry, very angry, and he screams, I'm going to kill you! I don't know if this is the right kind of response, but I'm just telling you what the rabbi was writing. But the friend of the father is there as well and says, hey, listen, Dad, you screwed the character of your son. And now you're screaming at him as well? Because, hey, Dad, you could have opened a perfume business shop anywhere in the world, but you did it in this neighborhood. And so the rabbi is saying, this is what Moses means when he says, Eternal One, of all the countries where you kept Israel in prison, in a captivity, where they were allowed to live, it was Egypt where they worship cows and calves. So the rabbi ends his writing, so keep in mind that you are the one who led them out of the corrupt land of Egypt. Now this sounds like Moses is accusing the Lord of the golden calf and says, yeah, you did it, it's your fault. No, that's not what he does. But he wanted to show how we people connect ourselves in situations where we grow up in and where we're living for a certain amount of time, and are tainted and are contaminated by our environment. That brings me to say the following. When you lived in a home where there was negative criticism, were you? Did you? Where there was spoken about other people in a negative way, where there was physical abuse to you or to people close to you, where there was not enough attention for you personally, where you need to take care that you survived, where waiting for something was something scary because something bad could happen, where waiting was something that you wanted to pass through quickly, where you never learned to wait and to practice to wait with Shabbat as a wink of the eye, where waiting and silence was creepy because this was when you were, when people didn't pay attention to you and did as if you didn't exist, where silence was a black hole and was very creepy and very scary, where art, singing or dancing, was something that wasn't to be done because this was not what we do. If you lived in these kind of situations, you can be sure that you did not learn well to be a good waiter. You were not taught to wait in the right way and spend your time and your expectations, and you spend your time in a way where you didn't have this uncertainty and your expectations didn't go into all kinds of directions except the good one. Your trust was damaged in these kind of situations. You learn perhaps to build your own calf, your own malted calf, your golden calf, in order to survive, giving you the comfort and the safety that you needed, more than your environment could give you. Time to leave your old milieu, time to leave your own environment, not only in terms of place, but also that what entered your heart, your soul. It's like you need to go into your own Pesach, Exodus, in order to not only survive, but begin to enjoy living. Because of all kinds of reasons that we all have experienced in our lives. Perhaps some quarrels and some battles between two people or in a family start because of something we never worked through well. Sometimes people leave congregations with a lot of noise because of their own not worked through uncertainties. Sometimes people break out of a relationship because of the bad example they had in olden days. And keep this in mind, and then go quickly back to the text where we started with this tabernacle. You make the frankincense altar, you make the holy oil and stuff like that. It's almost two different worlds. And it's right, it is two different worlds. And it should become one world. The beautiful things that are done in the tent of meeting between Moses and God should be superimposed on your life, your circumstances, and it should not be two worlds anymore. And so this old pain in our lives should be taken care of. And the answer that God gives is start celebrating Shabbat in a totally new way, in which we have this relationship. Don't mind the candlesticks, don't mind the bread, don't mind the wine so much, because it might be that you focus more on that than on the meaning of Shabbat. And God says, don't forget to celebrate Shabbat. You understand the connection? The connection is still there when all this preparations of this beautiful tent of meeting is taking place. God says, don't forget the Shabbat. And on the Mount Sinai, where God is showing himself, presenting himself toward Moses, he shows himself, he shows who he is, what he does, to teach us that we are not our own, in our own old schedules and schemes and in our own lives, where we learn to wait for him. The coming of Yeshua as the Prince of Peace, the King. Not by thinking we will see when he comes, but by giving a wink, a holy wink to God each Shabbat with your daddy in heaven. Remind Jacob fighting with God, and he didn't allow him to leave before this angel, being God himself, the face of God, blessed Jacob. Moses had to explain Torah to his people and lead his people, but first he asked God, can I see you? Can you show yourself to me so that I'm blessed and have an experience that I can work with? Perhaps this is the way we need to learn also, leaving the old environment that we come from And each Shabbat, not just have another Shabbat, but ask your Heavenly Father to give you a special blessing, a real wink, an eye wink. What to do? This is my final question, which is a repeat of what I said before. Think of this artist Bezalel, who was building this temple as a picture of ourselves in the best way we can become. What to do? Bezalel, in God's shadow. What do we need to do? What can we do to come into God's shadow? Answer. Discover your need to take shelter and to find shelter in God's sheltering place. I wish you Shabbat Shalom.